All right, today we're diving into a really powerful argument about history. It's a story about something you might not think about every day, how theft becomes law, how, conquerors become kings, and maybe most importantly, how the very words we use can be the most powerful weapons of all. So, the source material we're looking at today kicks off with this really provocative question. I mean, think about it. A sword can definitely seize territory, right? But it can't hold it forever. Brute force just isn't sustainable. To really lock down control, you need something way more permanent. So, what on earth could possibly be more powerful than a conqueror's sword? Well, the answer, according to this line of thinking, is an idea. After that first really brutal violence of the sword, a second, much quieter kind of violence takes its place. And this is the critical moment. This is where raw power tries to transform itself into rightful authority. It's a shift, you see, from the battlefield to the bookshelf, from the soldier to the scholar. And this is such a crucial distinction, so let's be clear. The physical act of taking land, that wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. That was just the opening act. The real work, the hard work of making that theft permanent, well, that was just about to begin. You see, ruling by force alone is just, well, it's inefficient. It's unstable. So conquerors, they needed a new kind of cover, a justification to make their gains stick for good. They needed to sanctify the theft, to make it look not just legal, but righteous. In short, they had to invent legitimacy from thin air. So this entire process, the source we're examining calls it the architecture of fraud. And it's all about, and I'm quoting here because it's so powerful, laundering blood through language. It's about how a few specific words were basically weaponized to turn a crime into an accepted, everyday system. Okay, so here's the first and maybe the most critical transformation. You take the raw act of just taking something, theft, and you reframe it with a new, legal-sounding name, title. A title, well, that implies a rightful claim, doesn't it? And just like that, by changing one word, the act moves out of the world of crime and into the world of law. Next up, you have the moral dimension. The violent act of conquest gets a makeover. Suddenly, it's the noble mission of spreading civilization. See, this isn't just a legal trick, it's a moral one. It paints the conqueror as some kind of benefactor, suggesting that all that violence was actually for the victim's own good. And finally, coercion becomes contract. Think about that. An agreement made under extreme duress, with a sword metaphorically at your throat, is presented as a completely voluntary, mutual agreement. This creates this powerful illusion of consent. It makes it seem like the people who lost everything actually willingly participated in their own dispossession. So if we break it down, the process is laid out in 4 pretty clear steps. Step 1, you seize territory by force. Simple enough. Step 2, you use that linguistic sleight of hand we just talked about to relabel the crime. Step 3, you build this moral scaffolding around it, using things like sermons and scholarship to justify the whole thing. And finally, step 4, you lock it all in place with institutions, courts, constitutions that treat these new definitions as cold, hard, undeniable fact. And this really reveals the core function of those new institutions, right? From this perspective, their purpose was never actually to protect the people. It was to protect the spoils, all the land, the resources, and the power that was seized in that first act of violence. So the big question is, how does this architecture of fraud survive all the way to today? Well, the source argues it's all about the powerful myths we're taught. Myths that, when you think about it, convince us to support a system that was actually founded on our own dispossession. Okay, myth number 1, the big one. The world is fair. This is the idea that the way wealth and power are distributed right now is fundamentally just. That it's all a result of merit and hard work, and not the outcome of a very long history of theft. Then we have the myth of the neutral market. This is the idea that our economic systems are kind of like forces of nature, totally impartial, totally objective. But the argument here is that they actually operate on a set of rules that were designed from the start to protect those original spoils. And of course, there's the myth of blind justice. We're all told that the law applies equally to everyone, but this completely ignores the argument that the law itself was designed from the very beginning to recognize certain claims, like title, while completely dismissing others. So after building up these huge, foundational beliefs, a fair world, a neutral market, a blind law, the source just comes in and delivers this really stark rebuttal. None of it was ever true. They aren't truths, they're stories. And they're manufactured stories, specifically designed to maintain an unjust order. So what happens to the people who see through the lie and are brave enough, or maybe foolish enough, to call it out? Well, according to this analysis, the system has a pretty predictable three-step response. First, you get dismissed as unserious. If that doesn't work, you're discredited as a radical. And if you still persist, well, as history has shown us time and again, you're often destroyed. Okay, in our final section, we're going to put a name to this entire architecture and look at how this theft isn't just some dusty historical event, but a very real, ongoing reality. The source we're looking at offers a single, incredibly powerful word to describe this whole system: fraud. And the argument isn't that there's just some fraud happening within the system. No, it's that fraud is the core mechanism. It's the engine that turned thieves into kings. I mean, listen to this line. Fraud is how the slaveholders became founding fathers. Wow. That just makes the argument devastatingly concrete, doesn't it? It yanks it out of abstract theory and forces us to reframe revered historical figures through this very different lens of sanctified theft. And this leads us right to the core thesis. Again, the argument is not that there is fraud in the system. The argument is that the system, in its very design, from its very origin, is fraud. So if the system itself is fraud, then it kind of follows that the official story we tell ourselves, about our history, our laws, our economy, has to be false. It's the cover story, not the real one. And this is so important. This isn't just ancient history. The conclusion here is that because the fraudulent system is still in place, the original theft isn't some single event way back in the past. It's a continuous, ongoing process, happening right now. Which brings us right back around to that final takeaway on legitimacy. It was never earned. It was never granted by the people. It was constructed. It was manufactured, after the fact, for one reason: to protect the gains of the powerful. And so, the source material leaves us with this deeply challenging question. If the foundational legitimacy of our institutions was actually manufactured to protect a crime, what allegiance do we really owe those systems today? That's definitely something to think about.